Oh, the snow, it melts the soonest when the winds begin to sing. And the corn, it ripens fastest when the frosts are setting in. And when a young man tells me that me face he'll soon forget, before we part I'd better crown, he'd be fain to follow it yet.
Our next poet is Sharon Doubiago. Sharon was living up in Mendocino during the 1970s, having come from Los Angeles. She was just finding her wings as a poet and would come down to San Francisco on occasion to check out what was going on. And then later she staged readings of San Francisco poets up in Mendocino, to which we would migrate en masse up Highway 1 along the coast for a getaway weekend up in the country near the ocean. I met her in the Trieste Cafe, which was the bohemian hangout in San Francisco in those days. She gravitated to Jack Hirschman and was very fond of his work and his vision. I would have to say that I think Jack has to be considered her major influence, but I could be wrong about that. She certainly was then and might still be even to this day, but she was also very interested in women writers. H.D. had a major impact on her and her own brand of feminism. And there were others. While she wasn't directly involved in the readings and activist events that were going on in San Francisco during those years, she was an avid student and presence, and taking it all in by osmosis. And I can say that her beauty and presence was felt by all whenever she would come to town. She stayed true to her vision, which has become a poet. She just had a major collection of her selected poetry written over the course of a lifetime entitled Naked to the Earth, published in 2017. Sharon Doubiago.
Wow, Tom, can you hear me? Is this the one to do? The first poet I ever, this is the one I should talk in? Okay, the first poet I ever encountered was Neeli Cherkovski. He was Neeli Cherry then. We were in a creative writing poetry class led by the poet Henry Coulette, who was total academic, and from the U.S., from the University of Iowa, considered their best poet, and I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know what poetry was. I didn't know what a poet was, but there was Neeli countering Henry Coulette. We were in a room with a long rectangle table, and Coulette would be at one end with his bow tie, and Neeli Cherry would be at the other end. And Neeli, I never heard him read poetry, but he told endless stories of Charles Bukowski. He was hanging out with Charles Bukowski, and so that was sort of amazing. The second poet I encountered or knew, I was taking a class from Peter Marin, and he kept talking about this poet who was the greatest poet in the 20th century, Jack Hirschman. So I went to 2 readings in that period. Again, I vowed once I got out, I got a master's degree in literature, and I vowed I'd never, ever be a writer, a poet, never. Because I had been educated by academics, and I knew better. That's not my path. But after 6 years, witnessing two readings by Jack, 1 month after I moved to Mendocino, in October 1974, I gave my first reading. And nothing's ever been the same since. So I'm still trying to decide. This is, I've read this several times recently, but I'll read it again. It's Kerouac and Monroe on Kalelak. Kalelak is a long, several miles long beach right at the tip of the United States on the northwest side, just across from Canada. And And I made all of this up. Marilyn is, you know who Marilyn is. So I tried to think about the two great male and female characters of the 20th century, and I came up with Jack Kerouac and Marilyn Monroe. One, Kerouac and Monroe on Kalelak. One, long ago they found each other here. She wanted to be like the wild stallion she had seen in Nevada. He had lost his mind in Massachusetts. They sat all day on the long beach. They drank beer propped against drowned trees. Sometimes they spoke. Mostly they stared at the sea, low tide, high. Their famous faces flared on the screen of the sky. Their faces grew tired, turned red. Their limbs dried. The sun fell. They became driftwood. They were dying. She said, "Tell me of sex." He recited Rilke's Ninth Elegy. She heard only the line, "and escapes in ecstasy beyond the violin." "Tell me," she cried, "of when you were a kid." 2, she slid her hand down the haggard belly, held him. He was warm, he stirred, he stayed small. He slept. She watched 12 pelicans row the horizon. She laid her head on the blade of his shoulder. She saw his face above the waves. It was the saddest face she had ever seen. She saw the face held knowledge of her death. She saw that the man might be the man who murders her. They walked miles up the beach looking for a bed. He quoted poets who had slept here. He said he knew the island was Tatoosh from the poems. He said poets find their lovers here. Later, they found a road sign. It named the island Destruction. 3, in a tavern on the highway, an Indian was saying, "Hunting elk is a disease. I seen an elk hunter pump 7 bullets into an elk that wasn't there, and he didn't even have his gun." "Tell me about sex," she said, as they drank. "Tell me who you are." He said, "I've been ruthless." The bartender asked, "Where are you two from? You look familiar, like a couple I know in Wyoming." The Indian went on, "You can take any road out of here, sleep overnight, hear them, the mating calls, cougar, lynx, black bear, this time of year." They walked back through slash piles. It was dark. He said, "I learned to be ruthless from the church. I took a vow of poverty." She searched the sky for the southern stars. She saw how far she had come. "Shit," she said, "I was born in L.A." 4, they made a bed beneath cedar on a bluff above the sea. She would have preferred the beach. He was afraid of rain. She was glad to know of something he felt. They made a small fire. They cooked soup in the can. They covered themselves with a single blanket. 5, when first they loved, when her body lifted off the needles, when her body rose and churned like the demonic waves, when her cries lifted to the night, screamed back at them like gulls. She knew why no man had ever stayed with her. 6, when second they fucked, she sobbed. She screamed it was not pleasure. He folded his arms around her back, lifted her from the ground. The water rolled from her face. He said, "What is my name?" 7, when they loved again, she remembered, "This may be the man who kills me." She felt his hands form the body she knew as a girl. She saw the raccoons watching them. In stars' light, their needles glistened. She thought, cougar, lynx, black bear. And such a light body he laid on her, so thin, his ribs. He was hard to find. He fled more than she. Are you ever, she searched cedar for the word, emotional? When he was through, he poured his dark face into her pale hair. She felt his body heave in the attempt to cry. 8, she watched the virgin slip into the water. She woke him. "Tell me about Ruthless." He told her. She lay quiet. This man could kill her. She watched the scales of love go down. She woke him. She whispered, "Don't be ruthless with me. You can get whatever you want without being ruthless." He promised. He slept. "Of course," she said to the scorpion, "I can take it." He was awake. He said, "I know you can." 9, once from the night, she heard the Indian again. Wednesday is hump night. That's halfway over the hump. She saw the raccoons getting ready. Cougar, black bear, she said, ruthless means a promise is nothing. He was awake, he said, I know, I thought of that. 10. When again they loved, as the hunter drowned as the night rolled over the hump of the sun, he shook her shoulders and cried, do you even know my name? 11. In the silver light of morning, at the coldest hour, they loved again. The tide was high. Water rushed the bluff. Cedar flared above them. He buried his mouth in the wild yellow grass between her legs. The seasons changed. It was summer when they met. Now the trees flamed and fell. 12. He took his shirt from her. He leaned over the bluff. The sky and sea found his body for her. Tell me, she said, about sex. He put on his black leather cap. The saddest face she had ever seen, smiled. He said, my name is Jack. Your name is Marilyn. And that is why we sojourn here alone on Kalelak. 13. They are so far from home. She says his name. He touches her lips. She will escape into ecstasy beyond the violin. When he can't cry, he will see his own face above the waves. He will shoot fictitious elk. He will be without his gun. He will be ruthless. and this is a short poem, and it's dedicated to Diane de Prima. Oh yeah. The meaning of no self. I hide my face, the front of my body, too yin, shot through by spears of light. The universe bears down to get through. My shoulders stooped, my head feathers. At my sex, my left hand holds the structure that holds the sun. I am overlit, overexposed. The three-headed dog yelps and dances at my heels. I am dread, penetrated by wheat.
The snow, it melts the soonest when the winds begin.